Welcome to the Arizona State Library Archives and Public Records presentation on digitization and digital records or electronic records practices, brought to you by the Records Management Branch and presented by me, Aeneas Santiago, the Records Management Specialist in our small unit. The Arizona State Library Archives and Public Records is a subfunction of the Secretary of State. Some of the pointers for this presentation were devised based off of our old Record Management Session 5 presentation, as well as presentations from other Secretaries of State such as Washington and Maryland. What I hope to cover today will be used by those responsible for records management in state and local agencies either in anticipation of conversion to a digital or electronic environment, in use of a digital leading records management system or digital based. We'll be covering a lot of topics, so it's important to first assert that if you have any suggestions or remarks, please let us know with our contact information at the end of the presentation. We will cover what the relation between a record and an electronic record is, its applications, core purpose and considerations, its fundamental pieces, and upcoming topics to electronic records management to look out for. We will also cover the process to digitize an agency's records, the benefit or nature of it, legal backing to digitize and its relationship with permanent or long-term records, some pointers towards vendors of records management systems, and the responsibility of digital records, born digital records and their management such as emails and what changes when a record is already in a digital format, and a couple challenge areas such as microfilm or digital permanent records. We will top it off with concluding points and a couple tips for records management in a digital world. Let's begin with the fundamentals by revisiting what a record actually is. More specifically, how does that definition change when a record becomes digital or electronic? Ultimately, it does not. The definition remains the same regardless of format. Whether a record exists on microfilm, diskette, or in the cloud, the same principles apply. The only distinction is that the information is electronically recorded rather than physically recorded, but the core considerations remain unchanged. That said, different terminology comes into play when discussing the components of a digital or electronic record. Rather than physical elements like fields, boxes, or lines, the National Archives, ISO, and other standards bodies generally divide electronic records into two main components, content and metadata. Content refers to the actual information contained within the record, such as scanned documents, audio or video recordings, Microsoft Office files, public-facing posts, or phone calls. But metadata is the information that describes the record and enables it to be located, managed, and controlled. This commonly includes identifiers, author, title, date and time created, confidentiality level, change history, and similar attributes. The important distinction, then, is separating the record itself from the information about the record. A helpful comparison is a file folder in a filing cabinet. The materials inside the folder are the content, while the folder label, its placement in the cabinet itself, and any identifying numbers or tracking details on the folder all function as metadata. That is just an example. The easiest way to assign metadata, and typically the way that we ourselves do it, is through assigning document properties in a menu tab for your PDF reader. As the most common application is Adobe Acrobat, this can be easily done through clicking on your PDF of choice and then going to Menu and then Document Properties. Other PDF readers work similarly. If you're using some kind of electronic records management system, however, these fields can typically be searched automatically as they are filled out. In general, metadata helps you find records from an administrative side easier. Your managers and supervisors might use it for statistics or to track employees' work, while regular staff might use it to easily circle back to records under their purview. Digital records management is a broad and increasingly central topic in the field today, and we have intentionally designed the remainder of our presentation materials with that reality in mind. In our introductory presentation, we introduced the concept of born digital records and broadened the traditional understanding of a record's life cycle to reflect how digital records are created, managed, and maintained. In the Officer and Records presentation, the forms introduced are far easier to complete and manage in a digital environment, while also establishing core digitization requirements. In inventorying and control, many of the suggested controls are significantly easier to implement digitally, often because they are already built into systems themselves. Reorganizing further demonstrates how a digital records management system can correct or improve upon practices that may not have worked well in the past. These examples highlight how digital records management is woven throughout our materials to reinforce that while digitization can be demanding upfront, it offers substantial long-term benefits and considerations. These include a shift in how we think about a record's life cycle, placing less emphasis on physical handling and more on ongoing management and high-level analysis, as well as easier creation, storage, monitoring, and disposition of records when supported by the right system. Records management can often feel disruptive when handled physically, but when integrated digitally with legal counsel, IT, and daily workflows, it becomes a foundational and constructive agency function. There are some downsides, but they are generally manageable with appropriate oversight. For instance, transitory records are much easier to generate digitally, such as accidentally saving multiple drafts when only a final version is needed, but because of this, identifying and capturing transitory materials at the point of creation is an important control to prevent clutter and even inefficiencies later. Agencies often ask where the legal authority exists to digitize records, and there are several key statutes to be aware of in that regard. Arizona Revised Statutes 41-151-16 authorizes the reproduction or digitization of records once our approval is obtained and minimum standards are met. 41-151 more broadly outlines an agency's responsibility regarding records and its relationship with our office. ARS 44-7041 specifically addresses electronic records and electronic signatures, stating that agencies determine the extent of digitization while continuing to meet all standard requirements for records management, retention, preservation, and disposition. For state agencies, this statute also ties into ADOA's role in IT oversight. In short, agencies are fully supported in digitizing their records. The scope is up to them, as long as the process is conducted thoughtfully and with our guidance or approval when required. State agencies are encouraged to coordinate with ADOA to ensure the appropriate technical infrastructure and support are in place. Before discussing digitization in detail, it's important to recognize that digital records management is a rapidly evolving field. New and emerging technologies continue to influence how records are created, processed, and analyzed. Tools such as artificial intelligence, intelligent document processing, automated audit logs and analytics, and especially cloud-based systems can greatly simplify certain areas or aspects of records management. At the same time, these tools may introduce new considerations related to oversight, governance, and control. This is not to suggest that new systems or the debates surrounding them are impractical or unreliable, but rather, the goal is to remain open to their potential while remaining aware of the risks that they may introduce, just as with any other records management method. Third-party systems can raise additional considerations, including contractual obligations, data ownership, and legal implications. Questions should be asked about whether a system has been proven in governance settings, how difficult it may be to migrate away from it, and whether it improves or restricts accessibility. These are the same types of questions agencies have historically asked as new technologies entered records management, from mainframes, for example, to diskettes, to removable media, to remote work environments even. The extent to which agencies adopt these tools is their decision, but no system should ever be treated as set it and forget it. As workflows become more automated and systems take on greater responsibility, routine auditing and validation are essential. Trust but verify. Ensure systems are functioning as intended, sourcing information correctly, and producing reliable outcomes through regular review. Always double check. With that foundation in place, let's revisit what we mean when we say that our insight or approval is required for digitization, and where that fits into the broader digitization effort. Digitization should never be treated as a one-step activity, but rather as a structured process with clear stages and decision points. The process begins with an assessment or full inventory of records. Before any scanning occurs, agencies should have a clear understanding of what records they hold, how long they must be retained, and which versions are considered the official record. Digitizing without this awareness can result in misplaced records, retention errors, or unnecessary work even. Early goal setting is critical so that success can be measured, determining which formats will be digitized, which versions will carry retention, what compliance requirements apply, and what quality standards must be met. Once assessment and planning are complete, preparation begins. Records should be sorted and organized in a way that mirrors how they will exist digitally. Transitory materials, duplicate copies, and non-record items should be removed at this stage to prevent clutter in the digital environment. Agencies should establish naming conventions, indexing rules, and folder structures in advance so scanned records are consistent and easily retrievable. Fragile or deteriorated records may require special handling, individual scanning, or flatbed equipment to ensure quality and completeness. After preparation, agencies move into coordination and approval. This is the point at which you engage with us if approval is required. Using the Officer and Records presentation of ours as a reference, agencies work through their records officer to submit the imaging request. This ensures proper internal oversight and confirms that records management leadership is aware of the project. We provide minimum imaging standards, including image quality thresholds and acceptable file formats based on color, graphics, and use. This step ensures both legal authorization and technical consistency before scanning begins. Following approval, the actual digitization process begins. Records are scanned or captured carefully according to the approved standards, ensuring clarity, completeness, and usability. OCR, or optical character recognition, is applied so that text within scanned documents can be indexed and searched. OCR transforms scanned images into usable, searchable data and is a critical component of effective digital records management. Many commonly used tools, including Adobe Acrobat, Microsoft OneNote, SharePoint, and AI-driven platforms, already include OCR functionality. Once digitization is complete, records must be reclassified within the chosen system. This step involves applying metadata as we talked about before, ownership, access permissions, classification controls, and system integration so records are searchable, secure, and properly managed. File paths, identifiers, and indexing rules play a major role here in ensuring records can be located and retrieved over time. Finally, digitization is not complete without ongoing maintenance. Agencies must routinely verify image quality, monitor for data corruption or unauthorized changes, maintain backups, and ensure system integrations function as intended. Digital workflows should also be adjusted so that newly created records are captured digitally from the get-go, reducing the creation of new physical records. Our involvement applies only to records with 10 years or more of retention. Records below that threshold may be digitized without notification or approval to us. To reinforce what I just said, let's recap the imaging rules referenced in the Officer and Records presentation. Records with less than 10 years of retention may be scanned without our approval. Once scanned, the digital version becomes the official record and carries retention. The original physical format may be disposed of without a certificate of destruction, and a certificate will be required when the digital record reaches the end of its retention period. Records with 10 or more years or indefinite retention must be scanned with our approval. After scanning, the original physical record may still be disposed of without a certificate of destruction, while the digital version becomes the official record and carries retention, requiring a certificate once that is disposed of. Records with 30 or more years of retention are classified as long-term records. For these, record series numbers must be identified and included in the imaging request to ensure appropriate oversight and long-term planning. This also includes indefinite records. Records with permanent retention must be scanned with our approval, and the original physical format must currently be retained. While changes to this requirement are being explored and worked on, it remains in effect at this time. Throughout our guidance, the terms scan, image, and digitize are used interchangeably, all referring to the process by which the digital version becomes the official record and the physical version becomes a copy, except in cases of permanent retention. Digitization involves more than scanning documents. It requires addressing a number of background considerations now to avoid future complications. These considerations generally fall into two categories: before and afterthoughts. Before considerations focus on readiness and planning. Agencies should determine what software will be used and whether it includes OCR, automated capture, and reporting features. Storage decisions must be made, including whether records will be stored on premises in some kind of server, in a cloud, or in a hybrid environment. File formats and tracking mechanisms must be selected to ensure long-term accessibility. Staff training needs, timelines, costs, and record volume must be realistically assessed. Agencies should also identify any records that are incomplete, under review, or subject to legal hold, as these may require special handling before digitization. After considerations focus on sustainability and long-term value. Agencies should reevaluate how digitization supports ongoing records management rather than treating it as a one-time convenient project. This includes automating lifecycle actions such as retention and disposition, managing the disposal of original physical records and eventual disposal of the digital version, implementing quality control measures, and identifying opportunities to replace outdated workflows with more efficient and modern processes. Cost savings, efficiency gains, and improved access should be measured to ensure digitization delivers meaningful improvement. Many before and after considerations are addressed through a strong records management program. Agencies that build and maintain their own systems may already have answers to many of the following questions, but agencies considering third-party vendors must perform additional due diligence. We provide resources to help guide vendor evaluation, particularly during RFPs or procurement process. The resources that we have focus on key areas such as contract terms, compliance with records laws, security and privacy controls, usability, automation, scalability, risk management, technical support, adaptability to change, and data sovereignty. This evaluation should be collaborative rather than the responsible of a singular person or function to figure out. Records staff, the records officer, executive leadership, and IT should all participate to ensure operational, legal, and technical needs are all aligned. Questions range from service level guarantees and data ownership rights to training availability on the program itself, automated retention and disposition, access restrictions, compliance with public records, state, local, and federal laws, and responsiveness to records requests. It also depends on what system or systems the agencies plan on using. Agencies rarely rely on a single platform. Instead, there are both specific systems where certain records are created or maintained directly, as well as overarching systems that aggregate, govern, or manage those records more broadly. For example, records may be created or stored within GIS or other analytical or mapping software. Web pages or social media platforms for public-facing relations and communications, messaging systems that document how an official determination was reached, or even Microsoft Office as a document creation format, database, or collaborative workspace. However, these examples of individual or task-specific systems are not on their own the full scope of an agency's record-keeping environment. They function as tools that often integrate into a larger records and information management or RIM program. Broadly speaking, these programs typically fall into 5 categories: Enterprise Content Management Systems, or ECM, Electronic Document Management Systems, or EDMS, Content Management Systems, or CMS, Electronic Records Management Systems, or ERMS, and Electronic Case Filing Systems, or ECF. Each serves a distinct purpose, and their use largely depends on the nature of the agency's work and the types of records being produced. For example, an ECF may be used to track legal matters, enforcement actions, or public records requests due to its case filing basis. CMS platforms are generally designed for public-facing content such as websites, press releases, and social media. EDMS often functions as a supporting environment for drafts, working files, notes, and figures that eventually result in a finalized record stored elsewhere. ERMS and ECM are typically the most comprehensive and larger systems and are often used agency-wide. In some cases, ERMS or ECM platforms can even encompass or integrate the other system types that I mentioned. ERMS focuses specifically on final records, including their classification, retention, access, and disposition, but ECM, by contrast, manages all agency information and data, records and non-records alike, within a unified environment. Regardless of the model, there is usually a system capable of meeting an agency's needs. The determining factors are scale, specificity, and how narrowly or broadly the agency wants record-keeping controls applied. An ECM may fall primarily under IT oversight, for example, while smaller systems like CMS or ECF are often jointly managed by IT and the program area and staff themselves. Ultimately, most agencies are not using their systems to their full potential. Even familiar platforms like Microsoft Office or existing RIM programs often contain underutilized features. Remaining open to both emerging technologies and untapped functionality within current systems is essential to strengthening records management over time. There are significant shifts in structural management functions at every stage of the record's life cycle as agencies move from physical to digital environments. Many of these changes are already reflected in the introductory RIM model, but record creation evolves from filling out and filing paper forms to digital generation, scanning, metadata capture, automated identifiers, and structured file paths. Access and preservation shifts from climate-controlled storage and manual retrieval requests to searchable databases, filters, data migration strategies, and off-site or cloud-based backups. Security and compliance move away from locked cabinets and manual review towards authentication controls, permissions, audit trails, and system-generated compliance reports. Policy and training expands from basic storage and security practices to include digital literacy, cybersecurity awareness, system governance, and automated enforcement of rules. Retention and disposition transition from physical shredding and labor-intensive transfers to automated deletion, transfer, or archival actions triggered by predefined rules. While this may sound like a significant increase in responsibility, much of this functionality is, thankfully, already built into most modern systems. The primary challenge then becomes ensuring staff and management alike understand how to use these tools correctly, fully, and that their use is periodically reviewed and reinforced. Even after transitioning to digital record keeping, agencies remain fully obligated under ARS Title 39 and 41, as well as Title 44 requirements related to electronic records and signatures. That meaning, agencies cannot delegate or transfer responsibility for public records requests and access, retention, or proper management to a third party. While digital systems may simplify compliance, the agency still remains legally accountable. This becomes especially important when questions of record sovereignty, data sensitivity, access controls, and disposition arise. Legal risk increases when records remain stored on third-party systems, when access is restricted by vendor limitations, or when disposition cannot be executed independently. Agencies must ensure contracts, system configurations, and governance structures preserve agency control over records at all times. With that foundation in place, let's shift our focus to records that are already created digitally, often referred to as born digital records. We receive many questions about specific edge cases, which we'll touch on later, but there are several universal principles that apply across agencies and systems. First and foremost, we strongly encourage paperless practices. If a record is created digitally, agencies should make every reasonable effort to keep it digital throughout its life cycle and never print it out. Printing digital records introduces confusion around what constitutes the official record. In nearly all cases, a printout of a digital record is considered a copy and does not carry its own retention requirement. Maintaining a single authoritative version helps reduce duplication, storage burdens, and legal ambiguity. Digital records also require periodic and intentional review. While digital systems reduce many traditional risks, they do not eliminate the need for oversight. Files can still become corrupted, overwritten, misclassified, or retained longer than required. Digital environments also tend to generate far more byproducts, for example, drafts, autosaves, attachments, exports, and duplicates, than physical workflows ever did. Periodic review by staff and supervisors is necessary to ensure that records remain accurate, complete, properly classified, and the official version. Automation is another critical component of effective digital records management. Wherever possible, retention and disposition rules should be configured directly within the system. Automated retention reduces reliance on individual memory and prevents backlogs from forming. But that said, automation does not replace accountability. Automated rules should be periodically reviewed to ensure they still align with legal, operational, and business needs. For most record series, only the final version should be retained, so drafts, working files, and interim versions are often created unintentionally and then forgotten about. Agencies should clearly define what constitutes the final or official record and ensure staff understand how to identify and retain that while allowing non-record byproducts to be disposed of appropriately. Another important consideration is data quality. Digital environments can encourage speed, which sometimes results in incomplete fields, inaccurate metadata, or inconsistent naming conventions. While digital record creation is faster and more efficient, accuracy and completeness remain just as important as they were in paper-based systems. Metadata is not optional. It is the mechanism that allows records to be found, understood, and defended later. Agencies should also maintain an inventory or internal log of disposed records. This practice has always been recommended for physical records and is arguably more important in digital environments where destruction can happen quickly and at scale. Disposal logs and inventories support transparency, audits, and legal defensibility. Finally, there are three non-negotiable principles. Records must never be stored in personal drives or devices. This includes local desktops, personal cloud storage, or mobile devices. Records must reside in agency-controlled systems or be transferred to them immediately. Use common, widely supported file formats. Proprietary or obscure formats increase the risk that records in the future will become inaccessible over time or failure to migrate. Controls are essential. Audit trails, access restrictions, version control, automation, and oversight should exist at every stage of the record's lifecycle. Controls protect both the record and the agency. One of the most frequent questions we receive concerns emails, messages, and other forms of correspondence, what their retention is, how long they should be kept, and where they belong. The key point is that we don't know what is or should be in your communications, so we can't put it on the general retention schedule. The content varies widely. Attempting to do so within the general retention schedule would be impractical and overly complex, but instead, agencies must establish internal policies that account for how email is used in their operations. Routine or transitory emails, such as meeting notices, scheduling confirmations, or general inquiries, should be deleted regularly, often supported by automated inbox retention rules. Many email systems allow agencies to apply default deletion periods, such as 1 year, to reduce clutter and risk. However, when an email documents a decision, approval, interpretation, instruction, the development of an official record, or transaction of business thereof, it becomes part of that record series and must be retained accordingly. In those cases, the email should be captured into the appropriate record-keeping system rather than just left in an inbox. This means that agencies must train staff to recognize when an email has ongoing value and provide clear guidance on what actions to take. Policies should address when emails must be retained, where they should be stored, which communication tools are appropriate for sensitive or official information, and legal holds and public records requests override normal retention rules. But if correspondence is responsive to a request, audit, or investigation, destruction must be suspended in some and every way for as long as that matter remains active. Emails, texts, chats, and messages are still public records if they document agency business. They should be treated consistently regardless of platform. Agencies are strongly encouraged to work with us to create custom retention schedule items for correspondence and to ensure that email systems and messaging platforms are not being used as long-term record repositories. Digital environments change how agencies must think about retention and disposition. One of the most common risks is over-retention, particularly when automated retention timers are not added or configured. Transitory records in particular tend to accumulate quickly when no deletion rules exist. Files should be periodically reviewed to ensure they remain accessible and uncorrupted. While digital records are not vulnerable to mold or fire in the same way paper is, they are still susceptible to system failures, improper shutdowns, hardware issues, or storage misconfigurations. But because digital records often exist within interconnected systems, coordination across offices and departments becomes critical. Retention should be ideally automated at the system level, with manual verification to confirm that retention aligns with legal obligations and operational value. Disposition should also be automated where possible and must be coordinated across all locations where the record exists: primary storage, backups, mirrors, exports, and secondary systems. If records exist in multiple places, all instances must be addressed when retention is met. Disposition must always be suspended when records are subject to legal holds, audits, investigations, or pending public records requests. Systems should be capable of freezing retention or overriding automated deletion when necessary. When disposition occurs, there should be clear documentation, such as audit logs or system-generated confirmations, showing what was destroyed when and by what authority. Despite the efficiencies digital systems provide, agencies must still actively manage the life cycle of each record. This includes identifying custodians, understanding record types, confirming compliance with applicable laws, assessing sensitivity, and monitoring the record's movement through the RIM process. The challenges of managing digital records closely mirror many of those discussed in other records management contexts, but they are often intensified due to scale, speed, and system interconnectivity. Digital environments introduce far more moving parts than physical record keeping, which makes policy, oversight, and internal audit especially critical. Without clear governance structures, even well-designed systems can quickly become inconsistent or non-compliant. Unlike physical records, which often force deliberate handling, digital records can be created, copied, modified, and shared almost instantly. This means, though, that agencies must place greater emphasis on routine system monitoring, configuration review, and internal audits to ensure controls are functioning as intended. Records management in a digital environment is less about one-time setup and more about ongoing maintenance, verification, and adjustment. User engagement is another significant challenge. Records management systems must be intuitive, but success also depends on users being willing to adapt to new workflows and evolving technologies. Resistance to change, informal workarounds, or inconsistent use of systems can undermine compliance and increase risk. Regular training, refresher sessions, and accessible support resources are necessary to keep staff aligned with expectations. Cost and scalability also play a central role. A digital records management program that cannot scale to accommodate intake volume, data growth, or new agency functions will eventually become as burdensome as a physical warehouse. Systems should be evaluated not only for their current capabilities, but also their ability to adapt to future needs, regulatory changes, and technological advances. While agencies with lower record volumes may face fewer cost pressures, high volume or public facing agencies must carefully evaluate long term expenses, including licensing, storage migration, and system upgrades. The goal is not just to go digital, but to do so sustainably. Up to this point, much of the discussion has focused on modern digital workflows, but this naturally raises questions about how older practices and formats fit into today's environment. Agencies often have records created under previous standards and technologies, and understanding how to manage these original formats is essential to a successful transition. Two areas then get the most question: the continued role of microfilm and the treatment of permanent records that are either digitized or born digital. These topics sit at an intersection of historical practice, legal obligation, future practice, and modern operational realities, and we will give our thoughts on those now. For several decades, microfilm and microfiche were widely promoted as a reliable preservation medium. It allowed agencies to condense large volumes of records, reduce physical storage demands, and create durable surrogates for permanent paper records. At the time, they were very effective and forward-thinking solutions. But the rapid evolution of digital record keeping fundamentally changed that equation. Microfilm and microfiche are difficult to integrate into modern workflows, slow to search, and highly dependent on specialized equipment and expertise. Accessing specific information often requires manual review, making it impractical for data-driven decision-making, analytics, or public records requests. Additionally, maintaining microfilm or microfiche programs requires ongoing investment in equipment, training, and environmental controls, which can be costly. Replacement parts and knowledgeable technicians are increasingly scarce. And in contrast, digital systems support full text search, rapid duplication, remote access, automated backup, and seamless integration with agency operations. For these reasons, microfilm and microfiche are no longer recommended as primary record keeping or preservation strategies. While they served an important role historically, they no longer align with the efficiency, accessibility, or sustainability demands in modern records management. Although microfilm and microfiche are no longer recommended, many agencies still hold substantial collections of them, especially on the local end. In many cases, agencies have disposed of the viewing equipment but retained the film or fiche itself, creating significant accessibility challenges. A record's core value is directly tied to its usability. If the agency or the public cannot reasonably access, review, or reproduce a record, they risk failing to meet legal obligations, including public records access and evidentiary requirements. Microfilm requires specialized readers and scanners, microfiche too, and without them, records are effectively locked away and unusable. Agencies generally have three options to remedy that. The first is to contract with a vendor to digitize the microfilm or fiche, converting them into a usable and searchable digital format. The second is to access external facilities such as ours, libraries, universities, or even archives that maintain microfilm or fiche equipment. The third and least desirable option is to acquire or repair machines solely for retrieval purposes. In nearly all cases, the long-term goal is digitization of these. Our recommendation against microfilm and microfiche reflects not a dismissal of its historic value, but a recognition that digital formats are better suited to ongoing access, compliance, and operational needs. We are available to assist agencies through this transition, regardless of the scale, or complexity involved. Permanent records present unique challenges, particularly as definitions in the law of durable medium for a record continue to evolve. For records originally created in physical form, existing requirements still apply. Scanning a permanent paper record does not authorize destruction of the original. In many cases, the physical record must still be retained or preserved through approved methods. Born digital permanent records, however, operate under a different framework. These records are created entirely in electronic form and do not require a physical counterpart. So printing a born digital permanent record produces a copy, not a new official record of any kind, and that copy may be disposed of once its immediate purpose is fulfilled. Because digital permanent records have no physical fallback, they require enhanced safeguards. This includes redundant storage across secure on-site and off-site environments, frequent and verified backups, and protection against unauthorized modification. Use of archival quality, widely supported formats such as PDF-A is strongly recommended to ensure long-term accessibility. Metadata and classification are especially critical for permanent digital records. These records are preserved not just for their operational or legal reasons, but also for our historical and archival value. Proper metadata supports authenticity, context, and discoverability, all of which are essential for long-term preservation, eventual transfer to archival custody, and researcher value in the future. Due to their significance, digital permanent records should be subject to more frequent review, stricter controls, and heightened oversight than non-permanent records. While we provide guidance, the archives team is the one that remains the primary authority for long-term preservation and should be engaged early in the process. Digital records management offers significant and measurable benefits in efficiency, accessibility, transparency, and accountability. While the transition from physical record keeping can feel complex or even overwhelming, it is important to remember that digital records are inherently modular and flexible. They allow agencies to rethink workflows, eliminate redundant or labor-intensive processes, and take advantage of automation in ways that were simply not possible in a paper-based environment. As a result, the role of records management itself is evolving. Where the field once focused heavily on physical storage, filing, and clerical repetition, it now emphasizes governance, risk management, compliance, and strategic oversight. Technology has not removed the need for human involvement, but instead it has shifted the focus of that involvement towards decision-making, problem-solving, quality control, and accountability. Records management is becoming less about handling records and more about managing systems and processes. It is also important to recognize that digital records management is not static. Systems change, laws evolve, and agency operations grow or shift over time. Ongoing review, continuous improvement, and open communication are essential to keeping digital record keeping effective and defensible. No system will ever be perfect at implementation, and improvement is expected, not a failure. Because of this, collaboration is critical. We strongly encourage agencies to share what is working for them, raise concerns early, and engage with us when exploring new systems, workflows, or technologies. Some of the most effective records management practices come from practical real-world experience, and those insights help us refine guidance and provide better support across the board. For all stakeholders, members of the public, auditors, courts, leadership, and frontline staff, you name it, there is a clear and growing difference between physical and digital records management in terms of effectiveness, responsiveness, and time spent. The opportunity now lies in how agencies choose to leverage digital tools thoughtfully and responsibly. With the right balance of technology, policy, and human oversight, digital records management becomes not just a compliance requirement, but a strategic and crucial asset. Thank you for viewing this presentation, and if you have any questions, please ask us on our website or send us an email at records@azlibrary.gov or for digital permanent records at archives@azlibrary.gov. This presentation also accompanies other presentation materials that may clarify certain areas contextually.